Don was the interim chief executive of the Australian Chamber of Commerce in 1991 and 1992. That is, in the immediate lead up to the merger. Don had a substantial background in industry bodies and a calm and inclusive demeanour that he holds to this day. It was Don's oversight that helped smooth the pathways to merger and which helped give us the strong organisation we have today. In 2008, then President Peter O'Brien brought Don back into the organisation as a consultant to work with myself and the board on our structure and the development of my first strategic plan as Chief Executive. Don was a pillar of strength and remains a close colleague to this day. Ladies and gentlemen, Don Lane. And Ray Pelham-Thorman. Ray was the Secretary and Executive Director of the Australian Chamber of Commerce for an astonishing 27 years, from 1958 until 1985. Ray served during a period of extraordinary battles over industry and trade policy and was one of the mantle holders of the free trade movement before it became largely the accepted wisdom of the Hawke and Keating and then Howard, Rudd and Gillard governments. The Pelham-Thorman Room in our Canberra Secretariat honours Ray's service in the same way as the adjoining Pallades Notes Room. Ladies and gentlemen, 27 years of service, Ray Pelham-Thorman. I'm going to hand a microphone across to a number of our guests, ask a couple of questions, impromptu, and I'm then going to ask Ian Spicer to say a few words on behalf of our former executive directors, chief executives. So let me start with Ray, who we've just introduced. Ray, it seems like a long time in years since you've held the post of Secretary and then Chief Executive of the Australian Chamber of Commerce. Do you have any reflections on whether the business of today is particularly different to the work you did in those 27 years? Do you agree with my observation that it's similar work, different faces?
Yes, I think that's quite valid. The role that you play, Peter, is undoubtedly more complicated and more sophisticated than the role that you played 20, 30, 40 years ago. But the essential elements that you outlined are the same, I'm sure. As far as the scene itself is concerned, vastly different. When I first came to the Chamber of Commerce, Sir Robert Menzies had been there for some time in the seat of Prime Ministerial Authority. And the country had a clear vision of where it was going, and the Chamber of Commerce, amongst other industry bodies, including the Associated Chambers of Manufacturers, are good rivals. We have access to the Prime Minister quite directly, as we would present to him each year the resolutions passed at our annual conferences. And he showed a very close interest in all we were doing and what we thought, and particularly what we thought of our chances of getting a lot of what we asked for. I can remember well his question when we put for about the umpteenth time that we should have decimal currency. He said in his inimitable fashion, "You know how much that would cost." Unfortunately, I've been reading the paper that morning and for the first time I'd come across the estimate that it might cost something in the order of £30 million. So my president, who was George Hastings at the time, leaned towards me and said, and I said, well, I have heard, Prime Minister, that it might cost £30 million. He said, yes, it is, and it's a lot of money. Anyway, I'm very delighted to be here today to uphold the old form, we might say. I've had two lives since leaving the Chamber of Commerce, but I won't bore you with those at the moment. So, over, back to you, Peter.
Thank you very much, Ray. I'm going to hand the microphone to Don Larkin. So on the period, the early 1990s, a recession in Australia. Business conditions were very tight and the Australian economy was undergoing change. How do you reflect on your time over those years with what you're seeing today? Are there any lessons to be learned for us in today's modern era?
Well, I am ashamedly come from the Chamber of Commerce side, as distinct from the employer side, and it's great to see Graham Byrne and Graham Samuel and John Clark and Peter O'Brien. And we were mainly concerned with trade, imports and exports, and our members were trade, developing small business, and in those days we had a particular interest in Melbourne, in the city of Melbourne, in the politics of the city of Melbourne. I can remember at that time the Labor Party had a career paths up through their unions into the higher levels and into politics. And I can remember Peter Costello and wanting the Chambers of Commerce to ally themselves with the Liberal Party to ensure that it was a pathway and would support Liberal Party policy unashamedly. And we said, no, we're independent and we have our own rights. We will not be part of a process, and we feel free to criticise you if the things that you are advocating are in the way or detrimental to free trade. So I think that has lasted, and that we still retain that independence today.
Thank you very much, Don. Ian, the Accord years were a period where the Australian economy underwent major transformation. It was a period of where Australia was still heavily strike-prone in particular industries, where the union movements, approaches and cultures were deeply embedded in industrial politics and the political splits after the Second World War in Australia. And yet the Accord was a mechanism used to try and manage those issues by a Labor government, but the business community was one step removed from it. How did that impact on your business advocacy, the work you had to do? And are there any lessons today for us in dealing with the industrial framework of the country?
Yes, thanks, Peter. Although maybe you're Tony Jones, it seems like a Q&A. But yes, they were. That was a period which is quite unique, I suppose, in Australian history to date, where the government of the day had a deal, an arrangement, an agreement with one of the economic partners within the country to the exclusion of the other. And I think it certainly made it extremely difficult for us to, first of all, know what was going on, mainly close to the Prime Minister and Treasurer of the day, but also to have the opportunity to influence on across the table negotiation. For a period of time, we were virtually not part of that discussion, and I think that meant that we then needed to step up our advocacy